This is for my this is for my communications class. I have to give a informative speech, and so like I told you guys already, it's gonna be on marijuana. So first, let's talk about the nation's view on marijuana. Okay, as Mormons, especially, it can be kind of skewed for our opinions on it because we have the word of wisdom and everything. But a lot of the world is just pretty used to other substances, especially like alcohol or tobacco. Those are the big ones in our country. So I just want to talk about what the world's view, or not the world, the nation's view is on marijuana use. So currently, 60% of the nation are polled to be in favor of the use of either recreational or medical marijuana. So that's more than half of the nation. Since the year 2000, this number has increased by 31%. So that's pretty much twice the people 17 years ago, twice the people have now become okay with this idea. Okay, so of these 60%, or even the people that aren't against it, 41% of the nation say they have tried marijuana at least once in their lifetime. 10% is recorded to have done it in the last year. So my opinion is skewed a little as well. I'm in favor of it with the right laws and implements. I don't think it should just be, like a free-for-all, but I think that with the limitation of it, just like alcohol or tobacco, that it should be a substance that we should be allowed to use at a responsible age. As you guys know, currently marijuana is illegal. This is actually since the year 1937 when it was outlawed. So in 20 more years, it'll be 100 years since you can't use it. So let's talk about first why it was outlawed. A lot of you guys have probably heard of the word prohibition, but may not exactly know kind of how that went down in the nation. So in the 1930s, there was a mass influx of Mexicans into our borders. This was because there was a Mexican Revolution that had taken place, and they all wanted to get out of their country for safer, secure jobs, stuff like that. They all wanted to come in, and many of them were coming in illegally, just jumping the border and setting up shop. And so the media wanted some way to make this seem like a bad thing, which I obviously think illegal immigration is a bad thing as well. I know how it hurts the economy. But anyways, so the nation was looking for a way to kind of attack them. And so the media started demonizing one of their highest recreational use substances, which was marijuana. They would often, put it in pipes or like joints, like roll their own cigarettes and smoke it. But America hadn't really heard of this marijuana before because in our medicines, where it was used highly, it was called cannabis. So it's kind of like the idea that taurine and caffeine are pretty much, they're the same chemical compound, but one is natural, they're called different things. Anyways, so the media started attacking marijuana as the reason to why these immigrants were necessarily a bad influence in our societies. So voters were quick to want to make marijuana illegal to try and control these lower class, these illegals. The black community as well used it pretty often. So let's fast forward a little to Nixon's war on drugs. My parents especially, they know what it was like to go through the just say no period. It's still used today, but not as commonly as it was back in the day. Nixon is on record to say that marijuana is perhaps the most dangerous drug in America. And he didn't necessarily mean because of, oh, it's super addictive and kills you and stuff, but he meant mostly just because of the influence that it has on the youth and on the generations. So let's talk about that a little bit. Is marijuana the most dangerous drug in America? Well, Let's first talk about um, the dangers that it has, the negative effects. So let's compare it to something that our nation is very familiar with, alcohol. So, every year, 0 deaths take place due to a marijuana overdose, whereas 2,200 yearly deaths are attributable to alcohol overdoses. And that's not just, oh, they drank and then they got in a car crash. This is pure overdoses, drinking themselves to death. Very serious issue. This comes out to 6 people drinking themselves to death in our nation every single day. That's way too much. 36% of all hospitalized assaults are attributable to alcohol, where rarely any of the time is marijuana involved. It is proved that marijuana is less addictive as both tobacco and alcohol, and many of you guys might be thinking, oh, how can that be true and stuff? Well, let me explain that. So there are 2 kinds of addictions. There's a mental addiction and there's a physical addiction. A physical addiction would be like the physical withdrawals of quitting caffeine, being tired, or the super paranoid effects that heroin can have, or LSD, as well as alcoholism. Leaving your system, your liver, it takes a lot for your brain to just kind of get used to being sober again. So the mental addiction is just the wanting it. It's not necessarily a physical dependence. You won't get sick without it, but your brain just kind of gets to it. Kind of like kind of always going to comfort foods, like fast foods, chocolates, stuff like that. Your body just wants it to help cope. So it's a less dangerous type of addiction, even though addiction is serious for any substance. Currently, 15% of our nation smokes cigarettes. So that's 15 out of 100 people. Mostly lower class people have been targeted for this. And many of these 15% of the nation say that they would quit smoking and transition to cannabis, something that has been proven to damage the lungs less for causing cancer than tobacco, even though it still can cause damage in the lungs. Okay, so 2 main chemicals in cannabis that are fairly unique are the chemicals THC, which produces the high and the inspirational thoughts and sometimes cloudy thoughts, loss of memory, stuff, that really feel good, high dopamine level in the brain. So that's the THC. And the other one is called CBD, which can help reduce the feeling of pain. And that's why a lot of medicinal use of cannabis, people are looking for high CBD amounts, because if they have cancer or they're dealing with back pain or something, this is what will help. And so these are the 2 popular types of chemicals that you want to see high numbers in, depending on what kind of high you're looking for. So let's talk about another danger of marijuana. And that's, you probably have maybe heard the idea that cannabis, marijuana, can lower your IQ. And this was studied in a high school in Europe, in Britain actually, between children. This is the only one that's on record, and they didn't find any statistical evidence showing that marijuana reduced IQ levels. And this was taken into account of high school students, and whether or not they drank or smoked was also recorded as well. Currently, marijuana is a Schedule I drug by the DEA. So there's 3 types of drugs: a Schedule I, Schedule II, and a Schedule III drug. And so a Schedule I is labeled as the most dangerous, like crack cocaine is labeled in here. Schedule II is for the less dangerous ones, which would be LSD and heroin, which means that there is recognized benefits to this drug, but not so much that it can just be an over-the-counter thing. And then the 3rd schedule is for less things, just like alcohol and stuff like that, something that at a certain age you can buy without any type of prescription. So the DEA has recognized cannabis as high risk of abuse and no medical value. This is something that, since Nixon's war on drugs has pretty much ended, this is something that many medical professionals have been debating over ever since, whether or not there are benefits actually. And since the marijuana is scheduled as a one drug, it's a Schedule 1 drug, it's really hard for laboratories to get their hands on it to actually study it. Um, and this is something that I think really has to change if we want to actually find out what would or would not be the risks of marijuana. We need more study. Um, Another held belief is that the use of marijuana will lead to other stronger drug use. And this, there is no proven correlation between. Often the people that do illegal drugs are going to do all illegal drugs, and so they're going to do marijuana. But this is like saying, oh, well, people that kind of eat chocolate or something, they'll later go to, oh, now they're going to be like obese and stuff. It's kind of just a fallacy saying that one thing will directly lead to another. There's no direct correlation statistics on that. So currently, 28 states have legalized either recreational or medical marijuana. 8 states have done both. They've legalized recreational and medical. Since we're in California, you guys all know if you voted, it was on the ballot last year in 2016 and it passed. So we now have recreational marijuana, even though businesses can still test for it. I kind of agree with that. I think that to an extent, if a business wants to choose to not hire someone because they choose to partake in marijuana, I think that's a good option because I'm a full believer in the free market and stuff. But I definitely think that there should be restrictions to ages, 21 to use it, much like tobacco is and alcohol in California. Most everywhere else, though, 18 is when you can do cigarettes, which I'm also in favor in, but that's another speech. So I think that there are many benefits, in conclusion, to marijuana, and that as a restricted but still accessible drug for recreational and medical purposes, that much like alcohol and tobacco, it should be used with a lot of restraint, but I still think that if you choose to partake in it, that you should have that legal right to have it if you choose. And so that's my thoughts, and I hope you guys liked my speech.